My next guest has been a public thorn in the side of Republicans for quite some time. It came to a head when she faced off with Mitch McConnell over a speech on the Senate floor in February. McConnell's complaint about the incident became a rallying cry for women and Democrats everywhere when he said that Senator Warren had been warned to stop, but, quote, nevertheless, she persisted. Joining me now, Massachusetts Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator, welcome. Thanks for joining me this morning. You are a fearless woman who every day is out there fighting for that little guy. And you have put regulations in place, or worked to put regulations in place over the last 8 years to protect that exact person. And many of those forgotten Americans, they believe that President Trump has the answer. So what are they missing?
You know, President Trump tapped into something important, and that is that families are feeling a lot of pressure, and a lot of folks are feeling angry. Angry that a young person can't make it through college without getting crushed by student loan debt. Angry that wages have stayed flat and that expenses have continued to climb for housing and health care. Angry that it's really tough to retire in America now and be able to keep a roof over your head and groceries on the table. But what Donald Trump has done since he got into the White House is he's turned over the keys to government to the billionaires and the bankers, and basically said, run this government the way you guys want to make it work better for you. Our problem is not that Washington doesn't work well enough for the billionaires and the bankers. It's working just great for them. Our problem is it's not working for working families.
Why? Why has income inequality failed to get significantly better in the last 8 years? Because when we look at the last 45 days, President Trump is surrounded by those CEOs who've been complaining the last 8 years. Why is it good times for them?
You know, that's a big part of what's going on here, is that it's policies set right here in Washington that over and over and over help those who can hire armies of lobbyists and those who can hire armies of lawyers. The policies here are for the billionaires, they're for the bankers, they're for the giant corporations. They get the tax breaks, they get the regulatory boosts, they get the great deals in Washington. And regular families, just people who are trying to put it together day by day by day, they're the ones who get left behind.
But Senator, you guys were in power for the last 8 years. Why is it that it didn't work for those good Americans you were working for?
Let's be clear about what it means to be in power. The Republicans had a blocking position. When they didn't have a blocking position, we got the Affordable Care Act through. And when they didn't have a blocking position, we got through the Wall Street reforms. But once they had a blocking position in the Senate and then in the House, we couldn't get the minimum wage increased. We couldn't get increases into Social Security. We couldn't get a more progressive tax bill. So look, I don't want to try to shuffle off all the blame. I think there's plenty that we can do, we should have done, we must do in the future on our side of the aisle. But let's be very clear. The Republicans have made their part of the agenda 100% obvious. They are here to make sure that Washington works for those at the very, very top, and they have done a great job of that.
I understand how frustrating this must be, since Republicans were in a position to block all this time and the American people haven't been served. Do you think you could work with Republicans, or is resistance the only answer? When we look at the health care reform bill, even Democrats said Obamacare needs to be improved. We've seen a new proposal yesterday. Could you work with Republicans here?
Look, let's pick the Affordable Care Act as the perfect example. For years now, we have said we need to make improvements to the Affordable Care Act, to Obamacare. And the answer from Republicans has been repeal, 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 repeal. Well, that's not an improvement. That would leave millions of people without health care, and even those who have health care with much less coverage. So what's happened now is they have presented an alternative. But the alternative is not an alternative that makes health care either more affordable or give better coverage to people across this country. The alternative they've given us is one that would cut health care for millions of Americans and take important protections out of the law. And here's the worst part: drive up costs for working families at the same time that there'd be new tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. You know, it's just more of the Republican plan. Make this place work great for those at the top. Don't worry about anybody else.
Well, the stock market is certainly working for people at the top, at least in the last couple of months. This is the first market-moving president we've ever had, calling out specific companies, discussing those companies, meeting with them during the transition time. And now we're in a position where he can use someone like Carl Icahn, one of the biggest, most predatory investors out there, to help advise him on regulation and who he's going to choose to be regulators. How do we address the fact that we've got a market-moving president? I mean, Martha Stewart went to jail over lying about timing and information that she had. You know, insider trading is a big, big deal, and we have someone who can send out a tweet and move a stock in seconds.
Right. And let's be clear. There are a lot of giant corporations right now who are just rubbing their hands, saying that what's coming for them is that the cops are going to be taken off the beats, that there's going to be less regulation, and that they're going to get even more tax breaks. So they think the world looks pretty great with Donald Trump out there, and every time he sends a tweet, they're just happier than they were the day before. But that rising stock market covers a lot of other problems around this country. Incomes are not going up for working families, but expenses are. Students trying to get an education are taking on an additional $100 billion in debt to try to get that education every single year. But seniors are retiring with Social Security, for many of them, as the only thing that stands between them and poverty, and Social Security stays stuck at much too low a level. The way I look at this is, yes, it's true. We're setting records in the stock market. GDP keeps going up. And those are important economic indicators of how America's economy is doing. But they're not all of the indication about what's happening. We need to look at the lived experience, family by family, across this country.
Is there room, though, for you to possibly change your position or open your mind somewhat as it relates to corporate America? We know how tough you've been on corporate America, but corporations do hire. They do help people, and we're looking at the way people voted, and maybe there's a line in the middle.
Look, I am all in favor of corporations making a profit, so long as they're not doing it by cheating their customers. I'm all in favor of corporations flourishing in this country, but I think they ought to have to pay their fair share in taxes. A market without rules, a market without a cop on the beat, may produce some extraordinary profits for a handful of giant corporations, but it will not make this economy work overall, and ultimately will not produce the kind of competitive market that really makes capitalism grow in this country. I want corporations to do well. I just want them to follow the rules, and frankly, I just don't think that's too unreasonable.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.